Nice to see people for story time today. Fantastic. Okay. So today I am very excited because I am going to read you one of my favourite stories. I have really enjoyed looking and seeing what's been happening on Facebook the last few days. All the teachers have been sharing their favourite stories, and it's really exciting because when the teachers say, oh, I really like this book, if it's one I haven't read before, I go and find it and think, oh yes, this is a really good story and I can't wait to read it. Or I can see some more people are arriving. Hi Thomas, hi Mia, hi Bryn, oh hello Amelie. Lovely, and Hebe's here today. Fantastic. Hello, Sophia and Michael and Justin. Oh, loads of people. It's fantastic. Well, I'm really glad you've joined today because when I was thinking about what story to read, I was thinking about what is my favourite. And it was really hard because if you have been in my class before, you will know I love story time. It is one of my favourite times of the day. Even when I was very small, I loved reading books. My mum and dad would say, come and do something else, but all I wanted to do was read stories. So story time is the perfect time for me. So I have chosen George's Marvellous Medicine today. I really love it. If you have been in my class, you will probably have heard me read it because I absolutely love it. Oh, we've got some more people arriving. Hello, Albert. Hello to Henry. Hello, Peter. Hello, Freddie and Flo. Oh, the Pearl Bubble are in my classroom watching me. Hi, Pearl Bubble. Fantastic. So, I can't read you the whole book today. We'll be here a really long time, but I'm going to read you a small part of it. I'm going to read you the beginning. And if you haven't read it before, you might decide that you want to read the rest of it at home because it is really fantastic. Hi, Kyle. Nice to see you. So I'm going to get started. Now, I'll warn you now, it is a little bit of a cheeky book. There are some rather cheeky, silly bits in it. And there is a rather horrible grandma in it. Now, I'm sure that you all have lovely grandmas, but the grandma in this story is not at all like the lovely grandmas I'm sure we all have. So just a bit warning, she is a little bit mean. So here it is. There is a warning at the start of the book. It says, warning to readers, do not try to make George's Marvellous Medicine yourself at home. It could be dangerous. So chapter 1 is called Grandma. I'm going shopping in the village, George's mother said to George on Saturday morning, so be a good boy. This was a silly thing to say to George because she asked him not to get up to any mischief. Well, it immediately made him wonder what sort of mischief he might get up to. And don't forget to give Grandma her medicine at 11 o'clock, his mother said. And then she went out, closing the back door behind her. Grandma, who was dozing in her chair by the window, opened one wicked little eye. I'm afraid I can't open one eye. Maybe you can. I'm not very good at winking. But she had one wicked little eye, and she opened it. And she said, now, you heard what your mother said, George. Don't forget my medicine. No, Grandma, George said. And just try to behave yourself. For once, just while she's away. Yes, Grandma, George said. But George was bored to tears. He didn't have a brother or a sister. His father was a farmer, and the farm they lived on was miles away from anywhere, so there were never any children to play with. He was tired of staring at the pigs and the hens, and the cows and the sheep. He was especially tired of having to live in the same house as his grizzly old grunion of a grandma. Looking after her by himself was hardly the most exciting way to start a Saturday morning. You can make me a nice cup of tea for a start, Grandma said to George. That'll keep you out of mischief for a few minutes. Yes, Grandma, George said. George couldn't help disliking Grandma. She was a selfish, grumpy old woman. She had pale brown teeth and a small, puckered-up mouth, like a dog's bottom. How much sugar in your tea today? Grandma George asked. 1 spoon, she said, and no milk. Most grandmothers are lovely and kind and helpful old ladies, but not this one. She spent all day, every day, sitting in her chair by the window, and she was always complaining and grousing and grouching and grumbling and griping about something or another. Never once, not even on her best days, had she smiled at George and said, "Well, how are you this morning, George?" or "Why don't you and I have a game of snakes and ladders?" or "How was school today?" She didn't seem to care about other people, only about herself. Oh dear, she obviously doesn't know our Pashley values very well. She was a miserable old grouch. Gran and George went into the kitchen and made Grandma a cup of tea with a tea bag. He put 1 spoon of sugar in it and no milk. He stirred the sugar in really well and carried the cup into the living room. Grandma sipped the tea. "Ugh, it's not sweet enough. Put sugar in." George took the cup back to the kitchen and added another spoonful of sugar. He stirred it in again and he carried it carefully to his grandma. "Where's the saucer?" she said. "I won't have a cup without a saucer." And George fetched her a saucer. Well, I didn't hear her say please or thank you once. "And what about the teaspoon, if you please?" Oh, phew, she did remember some manners. "I've already stirred it for you, Grandma. I stirred it well." "I'll stir my own tea, thank you very much," she said. "Fetch me a teaspoon." When George's mother or father were at home, Grandma never ordered George around like this. It was only when she was with him on her own that she began treating him really badly. "You know what's the matter with you?" the old woman said, staring at George over the rim of her teacup with those bright, wicked little eyes. "You're growing too fast. Boys who grow too fast become stupid and lazy." "Oh, but I can't help it if I'm growing fast," Grandma George said. "Of course you can," she snapped. "Growing is a nasty, childish habit." Oh dear, she really isn't rather nice. Especially with the children at Pashley, I know you've been growing lots, and we think it's brilliant. "Well, we have to grow, Grandma," he said. "If we didn't grow, then we'd never be grown-ups." "Rubbish, boy, rubbish," she said. "Look at me. Am I growing? Certainly not." But you did once, Grandma." "Only a very little," the old woman answered. "I gave up growing when I was extremely small, along with all those nasty childish habits like laziness and disobedience and greed and sloppiness and untidiness and stupidity. You haven't given up any of those things, have you?" "But I'm still only a little boy, Grandma." "You are 8 years old," she snorted. "That is old enough to know better. If you don't stop growing soon, it'll be too late." Too late for what, Grandma?" "It's ridiculous," she went on. "You're nearly as tall as me already." Well, I know lots of the past children are growing really tall, and I also know lots of you are very nearly taller than me, but I don't mind at all. Good job you don't see Grandma. She wouldn't like that at all. George took a look at his grandma. She certainly was a very tiny person. Her legs were so short she had to stand on a footstool to put her feet on, and her head only came halfway up the back of the armchair. Daddy says it's fine for a man to be tall, George said. Don't listen to your daddy, Grandma said. Listen to me. But how do I stop myself growing? George asked her. Eat less chocolate, Grandma said. Does chocolate make you grow? George asked. It makes you grow the wrong way, she snapped. Up instead of down. I don't think I'd like to grow down. Grandma sipped some tea, but she never took her eyes from the little boy who stood before her. Never grow up, she said. Always down. Yes, Grandma, said George. And stop eating chocolate. Eat cabbage instead. Oh, cabbage, George said. Oh, no, I don't like cabbage. It's not what you like or what you don't like, Grandma snapped. It's what's good for you that counts. From now on, you must eat cabbage 3 times a day. Mountains of cabbage. And if it's got caterpillars in it, so much the better. Ouch, George said. Caterpillars give you brains, the old woman said. My mummy washes them down the sink, George said. Mummy's as stupid as you are, Grandma said. Oh dear, she really isn't very nice. Cabbage doesn't taste of anything without a few boiled caterpillars in it. Slugs too. Not slugs, George cried out. I couldn't eat slugs. Whenever I see a live slug on a piece of lettuce, Grandma said, I gobble it up quick before it crawls away. Delicious. She squeezed her lips together so tight her mouth became a tiny, wrinkly little hole. I wonder if you could do that too. It's quite tricky. Delicious, she said. Worms and slugs and beetly bugs. You don't know what's good for you. You're joking, Grandma, George said. I never joke. Beetles are perhaps the best of all. When you eat them, they go crunch. Oh, Grandma, that's beastly. The old hag grinned, showing those pale brown teeth. Sometimes, if you're lucky, she said, you get a beetle inside the stick of your celery. That's what I like. Oh, Grandma, how could you? Oh, you find all sorts of nice things inside sticks of raw celery, the old woman went on. Sometimes it's earwigs. Oh, I don't want to hear about it, cried George. A big, fat earwig is very tasty, Grandma said, licking her lips. But you've got to be very quick, my dear. When you put one of those in your mouth, it has a pair of sharp nippers on its back end. And if it grabs your tongue with those, it never lets go. So you've got to bite the earwig first. Chop, chop, before it bites you. George started edging towards the door. He wanted to get as far away from this filthy old woman as possible. You're trying to get away from me, aren't you? She said, pointing a finger straight at George's face. You're trying to get away from your grandma. Little George stood by the door, staring at the old hag in the chair, and she stared back at him. Could it be, George wondered, that she was really a witch? He'd always thought that witches were only in fairy tales, but now he was not so sure. Come closer to me, little boy, she said, beckoning him with her horny finger. Come closer to me and I will tell you secrets. George didn't move. Grandma didn't move either. I know many great secrets, she said, and suddenly she smiled. It was a thin, icy smile, the kind a snake might make just before it bites you. Come here to your grandma and she'll whisper secrets to you. George took a step backwards, edging closer to the door. You mustn't be frightened of your old grandma, she said, smiling the icy smile. George took another step backwards. Some of us, she said, And then all at once, leaning forward in her chair and whispering in a throaty sort of voice George had never heard her use before, she said, "Some of us have magic powers that can twist the creatures of the earth into wondrous shapes." A tingle of electricity flashed down the length of George's spine. He began to feel a bit frightened. "Some of us," the old woman went on, "have fire in our tongues and sparks in our bellies and wizardry in our fingertips. Some of us know secrets that would make your hair stand on end and your eyes pop out of their sockets." George wanted to run away, but his feet seemed to be stuck to the floor. "We know how to make your nails drop off and your teeth grow out of your fingers instead." George began to tremble. It was her face that frightened him the most. The frosty smile, the brilliant, unblinking eyes. We know how to have you wake up in the morning and have a long tail coming out from behind you." "Grandma," he cried out, "stop!" "We know secrets, my dear, about dark places where dark things live and slurm and sliver all over each other." George made a dive for the door. "It doesn't matter how far you run," he heard her saying. "You won't ever get away." George ran into the kitchen and slammed the door behind him. Oh dear. And I'm just going to read you a tiny bit of the second chapter, because that is where George has his marvellous plan. Now, he has a horrible grandmother, and I know that none of you will have. And I know none of you would ever do anything this cheeky. But George has a special reason for doing something rather sneaky. George sat down at the table in the kitchen. He was shaking a little. Oh, how he hated his grandmother. He really hated the horrible old witchy woman. And all of a sudden, he had a tremendous urge to do something about her. Something whopping. Something absolutely terrific. A real shocker. A sort of explosion. He wanted to blow away the witchy smell that hung about her in the next room. He may have only been 8 years old, but he was a brave little boy. He was ready to take this old woman on. "I'm not going to be frightened by her," he said softly to himself. But he was frightened. And that's why he wanted suddenly to explode her away. Well, not quite away, but he did want to shake the old woman up a little bit. Very well then, what should it be? This whopping, terrific, exploding shocker for Grandma. He would like to put a firework banger under her chair, but he didn't have one. He would have liked to put a long green snake down the back of her dress, but he didn't have a long green snake. He would like to have put 6 big black rats in the room with her and lock the door. But he didn't have 6 black rats. As George sat there pondering this interesting problem, his eye fell upon the bottle of Grandma's brown medicine standing on the sideboard. Rotten stuff it seemed to be. 4 times a day, a large spoonful was shoveled into her mouth, and it didn't do her the slightest bit of good. She was always just as horrid after she'd had it as she was before. The whole point of medicine, surely, was to make a person better. If it didn't do that, then the medicine was quite useless. So-ho, thought George suddenly. Aha! Oh, ho, ho, ho! I know exactly what to do. I shall make her a new medicine. One that is so strong and so fierce and so fantastic, It will either cure her completely or blow off the top of her head. He would make her a magic medicine no doctor in the world had ever made before. George looked at the kitchen clock. It said 10:05. There was nearly an hour left before Grandma's next dose was due at 11. Here we go then, cried George, jumping up from the table. A magic medicine it shall be. And that is where I'm going to leave it. I wonder what sort of medicine George will make. I wonder if you've read the story before and you already know some of the crazy things he's going to put in his medicine. Well, I think it's really exciting and I love it when the Pashy children use their imagination. I will love looking at all your challenges on Facebook. So today I have a new challenge for you. I would like you to think, if you could make a marvellous medicine, what sort of marvellous medicine would you make? What would your medicine do? And who would it be for? Would it be some sort of kindness medicine that would make everyone feel happy inside? Or would it be a cheeky medicine that would turn people into frogs? And what would you put in the marvellous medicine to make it work? I wonder if anyone already has any ideas. I think I would use something rather spectacular in mine. I'd have to go on a hunt round my house to see what I could find. So today, I'd like you to think about what you would like to put in your medicine. I'd like you to think about what it would do and who you'd make it for. And if you would like to design your own medicine, I'd love to see it. You could just draw some pictures and think about what you would put inside it. Or the grown-ups at your house might even let you mix together a few things and see what we can make. But remember, like at the beginning of the story, if you mix things together that you can't eat and drink, not to eat and drink them. If you decide to make one, I would love to see it. So please pop it on Facebook today and I'll have a look. I hope you have a lovely day, whatever you are up to. And I will see you all really soon. Take care and thank you for watching. Bye, everybody.